Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The United States has resumed intelligence sharing and military support for Ukraine. This is a direct result of the ceasefire deal negotiated yesterday in Jeddah between Ukraine and the United States. The ball for any truce now is in Russia's court, according to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the EU. What concessions could Ukraine have made, and has this had any impact on the war on the ground? To address these questions, we are joined by Iuliia Osmolovska, Director of GLOBSEC Kyiv. Iuliia is a career diplomat with 15 years of diplomatic service at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, with particular focus on EU integration and European security. Iuliia, welcome back to TVP World and thank you for taking the time.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it looks like it's good news for Ukraine, doesn't it? Ceasefire deal seems to have been agreed, certainly from the Ukrainian perspective. The mineral deal seems to be back on its feet. Your comments on the situation as it stands?
Yes, definitely it is the results of these negotiations have been met with a sort of relief in Ukraine. So we definitely see that constructive communication has been restored with the American side, but we shouldn't be saying that the ceasefire has been agreed at this stage, because definitely we need to wait for response from Russia, because it's not something to be agreed between Ukraine and United States only. We have an important player, actually a rule breaker and aggressor in our country, who actually has to take his say on that. So what happened actually yesterday, it was that Ukrainians were able to show and to prove to American side that we are very keen to reach peace and we are ready to accept this proposal of immediate ceasefire with ban on any military activities in air and land, and also touched upon very important issues for Ukraine. But it's still far from even contours of potential peace settlement, and these two processes should be detangled from each other, because once we have to build these confidence measures and then have this ceasefire at least for 30 days, and then only to start working on this comprehensive peace settlement.
Certainly, yes, ceasefire very different to a peace deal. And I do want to talk about the possible Russian reaction. But before that, there are a number of elements. There are a number of elements associated with this. I've already mentioned the mineral deal is back on the table, but also the resumption of sharing of military intelligence and military supplies to Ukraine. What do you think the quid pro quo was from the Ukrainian side?
At this stage, I think that it was not something very big and important considered from Ukrainian side at the moment. We do know that the Ukraine's position is actually with this potential peace settlement to get back at least to the borders of February 2022, something which the American side is not ready to discuss or to consider at the moment. And this type of talks had not been mentioned in the joint statement. So the both sides concentrated on something more concrete, more visible, more immediate and productive to go ahead. And this is definitely the first step forward. And so definitely if these difficult and challenging issues had been discussed between the two sides, this is not something that would went out to press and public, as already something agreed from Ukrainian side to concede.
Understood. So we shall have to wait and see. Now let's move to the Russian response. Sergei Lavrov hasn't seemed overly enthusiastic about this. He says, well, he's been very non-committal. What do you think their response is likely to be? What are their considerations going to be when responding?
Russian side and their responses, at least what we can grasp from the public sources, are mixing demands and kind of statements when it comes to ceasefire and to peace settlement together. So if referring to Sergei Lavrov stuff, he said that we won't be accepting anything which could be detrimental to Russian interests, and as part of it, the presence of European troops in Ukraine. But this is something that should be discussed within this framework of peace settlement. When it comes to ceasefire, very simple actions are required, like stop fighting, don't send any drones and missiles over Ukraine, and then also our president said that he is ready to consider the stop of the fighting on the front line, on the contact line. So basically, this is something that Russian side has to respond to, and this will be a litmus test for them, definitely. How truthful are they when they claim that they want peace? And American side tends to believe that. So I think that right now it's high momentum for the truth to be shown.
Understood. Now, you talk about drones and attacks. Yesterday, the very large attacks on Moscow by Ukrainian drones, and after that, of course, the other way around with deaths and injuries in Ukraine. The battle seems to be, or the war, I beg your pardon, seems to be intensifying. Is there a connection between that and possible peace talks?
Yes, there is a definite connection. First, because Russians had been encouraged by this temporary suspension of Americans providing Ukraine with intel's data and also with military assistance. So Russians felt emboldened and intensified their attacks, as you know. On the other side, this is typically Russian negotiation style, if you wish. When they're up to a critical moment to negotiate, they tend to increase hostilities, something that we observed with the Minsk Accords when they were discussed with Ilovaisk cloak drone and also Donetsk and Debaltseve cloak drone. So this is very typical for Russians to play like that. But as I said again, the most illustrative would be their reaction to American side, because this is not something that Ukrainians would be asking. The idea of this immediate ceasefire of 30 days had been officially labeled as someone suggested by American side. So Russians have to respond to Americans. This is why these 2 days, today and tomorrow, these 2 days will be very important to see the official Russian reaction, because we haven't received anything official coming from Kremlin so far.
Okay, now you talk about negotiation tactics. I want to focus on Donald Trump's negotiation tactics. They were quite extreme, and many would say anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia. Well, Ukraine and the US seem to be on the same page now. What happens if Russia doesn't fall in line with well-intentioned ceasefire talks?
Well, it's definitely will be detrimental to Donald Trump's reputation, because it will show that Russia actually disregards and disrespects him, on the contrary to what he claims, that Russia and Putin personally thinks high of Donald Trump and is very respectful. So this will be the biggest probably negative outcome of that. And what kind of reaction from the American side would follow, logically, is to anticipate the increase of assistance to Ukraine and imposition of higher sanctions on Russia. There already been some congressmen that highlighted this possibility if Russia remain non-constructive. And this is something which we see as a trend at the moment. So we still have to see and to wait for official reaction from Kremlin, then to plan and anticipate next steps, and first and foremost from the American side, because it's actually the first immediate effect is the first and immediate effect is the damaged reputation of the United States president as the broker in this.
Right. So what about the mineral deal? How does that fit into this jigsaw puzzle, Iuliia?
I think that the mineral deal has been like the first relatively neutral step to start with the American side. Ukrainian side, as you know, wanted to have more stronger language and linkage to security guarantees, but we haven't seen this in the text of this framework agreement. But this is something that we're hoping for to have more convergence, to see more convergence of the position of Americans and Ukrainians when it comes to further consultations, because, as I said, constructive dialogue has been resumed. And the deal has already been almost agreed, so just a formal moment to sign it. This is why I don't anticipate any difficulties and challenges on this track. But also, let's not forget that this type of approach of signing these deals on critical rare minerals, which are important for strategic industries for America, has also been the case with the Afghanistan, when the deal was signed in 2017 by Donald Trump with the then president of Afghanistan. And then it didn't help much when it comes to all these critical events in 2020 and respective withdrawal of American troops. So we should be considering this as a good first step when the dialogue with the Americans had been launched, but not self-sufficient when it comes to the security guarantees to Ukraine. So a lot has to be done within the next rounds of consultations between Ukrainians and Americans on that.
Understood. Just to be clear, Iuliia, one of the responses by the US side was that simply by having US investments in Ukraine, protecting US personnel and so on, would in itself be a security guarantee, because any attack on them would be an attack on the US, which it would have to respond to. You don't subscribe to that view, I take it?
As I say, unfortunately, we would wish it to be this case, but unfortunately, we have examples in the history that didn't work much. So, to my mind, on top of that, more engagement of American to support Ukraine in this peace track, which is very important. And when Russia is stepping down from this officially declared claims that they want peace, but in fact they won't be showing that, will be very important to see that America is more involved and is more leaning to Ukraine's side and supporting it. And I think that this will give us greater leverage to achieve the peace settlement. However,
Understood.
I still think that it might be not perfect.
No, well, things rarely are, unfortunately. Iuliia, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your expertise with our audience. Come and see us again soon. Have a good day.
Thank you. Likewise.
Bye-bye. And that's all from us on World Talks. Goodbye.